appreciate the attention. It's my pleasure as chair of the Atlas Board to introduce Judge Alex Kozinski. Judge Kozinski was born in communist Romania. He became a capitalist on a trip to the West, and shortly after that, at the age of 12, when his parents, who were Holocaust survivors, immigrated to the United States. He clerked for Justice Kennedy on the Ninth Circuit when Justice Kennedy was serving there. Then he clerked for Chief Justice Warren Burger on the Supreme Court. He was appointed to the U.S. Court of Federal Claims in 1982. He was, in 1985, appointed by President Reagan to the Ninth Circuit as the youngest appointee to a federal circuit at that time. And then in 2007, he became the Chief Judge of the Ninth Circuit. He is one of America's greatest pro-freedom judges, and it's my pleasure to introduce Judge Kozinski.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A real pleasure to be here. I was told to be short, which is easy for me, but I also try to be brief. I know why I'm really here, you know, having been sort of the star of Atlas Shrugged 2. You probably all... Now, I only had a couple of seconds on the screen, but, you know, when you've got emotive power, you know, it comes through. So you want your autographs, you can come by later. Now, I have a confession to make. It's really not much of a confession, but it's actually true. I was a communist. No, it's not a joke. I grew up in communist Romania. That's all I knew, and I believed in it. I believed in communism. I grew up in a place where the state gave us everything, and we were taught to be grateful to the state for, and the party, the Communist Party, for what it gave us. And when my parents decided to leave, they didn't tell me about the flaws of the system, because, of course, it was dangerous to tell young children subversive thoughts like that. So I left believing in communism and thinking, you know, I'd go over there to the oppressed West. I could never figure out why they had the Statue of Liberty, but anyway, I knew it was oppressed because we were told so. And that once I got there, since I had grown up in freedom and plenty and this wonderful system, I would be able to teach people, and I would be able to convert them and tell them the beauty of communism and help spread it. And as you heard, I came to the West, and I don't remember changing my mind, but spending a couple of days, and I found bubblegum and chocolate and bananas and just breathed the freedom, you know. And overnight, I became a capitalist, and I've been a capitalist ever since. I had a sort of doubts along the way, and they came when I was in college, and when because it seemed like everybody disagreed with me in college, and I was not at a particularly liberal school. It was UCLA, sort of a party school. It wasn't Berkeley or you know, Harvard, MIT, one of those. But nobody agreed with me. None of my friends, none of my teachers. Nobody in the dorm, and I sort of began to wonder whether, you know, I was sort of the one weird guy who thought that maybe sort of more freedom and more personal initiative was really the way to go. And I sort of almost lost my anchor, and then someone suggested I read Ayn Rand. And I said, really? She says, yeah, you know, she's some really sexy scenes, I'm not kidding. This is but it was the ideas too. But this person hadn't read it, but recommended it. She said, you might like Ayn Rand, because. And I must say, I did read Ayn Rand, and it gave me a, you know, of course, she also had a bout with communism early in her life, and she also came to America and came to realize what it stood for in a way that I think people who are born here really can't. And it eventually I found others, but the books and Ayn Rand and what she wrote and her philosophy saw me through that difficult period and helped me sort of make it to adulthood, to the place where I could find others of like mind. Now it's very important to keep that, her message alive, and to keep her inspiration alive and the ideas that she had, and make them available for young people, because in some ways they are very much like what I was when I was born in Romania. They are born into society, and they live in a society where it is taken for granted that much good, that, if anything is good, it comes from the government. And if there's a problem to be solved, it has to be solved by the government, because it can't be solved by individuals. That individual initiative is second to government largesse, and that the way to get ahead is to get a little bigger piece of the pie that the government hands out. And so it's very, very important that, the fact that the Atlas Shrugged is being made and has been made into a movie and is continuing to be made, the fact that young people are able to see it and are able to be exposed to the ideas, and and they have student groups like what is it called, American? Students for Liberty. It turns out my incoming law clerk is one of the founders. I just found out. I didn't even remember. But anyway, it's very important that there be this kind of ideas be made available to young people, because they grow up, they drink the water, they breathe the air, and they never have a chance to appreciate the idea that true happiness and true freedom comes from personal initiative and not as a gift from the government. And you are all to be thanked for supporting this. It's very, very important. Thank you.
But now we turn to the panel on Atlas Shrugged Part 3. We're going to be hearing about some of the plans and hopefully a glimpse of what the script is going to look like. With John Aguilera, Harmon Kaslow, the producers, and Duncan Scott, the screenwriter. But first, it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of the panel, Joan Carter. One of the things I discovered when I started this organization was that I love putting on events and introducing speakers.
You don't have to look at me. You can look at me. You can't help it.
Can I choose? One of the things I discovered is that introducing speakers was an unexpected pleasure, because I finally realized it's like giving presents. People I know, a good present is someone or something that the recipient needs, wants, but never expected. And the result you aim for is, how did you know? Well, on our panel, we have John, we have Harmon, we have Duncan, and guys, I love you, but I've introduced you before. It's a little like giving your dad a tie on his birthday. But Joan is new, and I couldn't be happier in introducing her. Joan is a businesswoman of true accomplishment. With John, she is the co-founder and owner and manager of Holdings, which holds Cybex International, the exercise equipment firm, and EHE International, an executive health service. She has also been recognized multiple times. She's on the boards of their holding companies, but is also on the board of the Penn Mutual Insurance Company. She's a former chairman of the board of directors of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. She's, are you still on the board of Worcester College? Yeah, her alma mater, where she is a prominent person. And she has received numerous awards and is often invited to speak about women in business. And there's no one better. She is now actively involved in the movie, and I know what that's going to mean to the organization of the movie, given your business skills. Thank you, sweetheart.
Jeekers. I think I may even want to know me. So I'm going to introduce our three panel members tonight. I'll ask them to just stay at their seats. They can all come up at one time. We have John Aglioloro, who I know quite well. And John is truly a Renaissance man. He is first and foremost an entrepreneur. When he grew up in South Philly, and when all the other kids were in the street, you know, playing stickball and stuff, John was on a bus going to the ice house to get ice so he could sell snow cones, which he did quite successfully. There's a lot of profit in snow cones, if those of you who haven't tried it. He is the co-founder of UM Holdings. You heard about that. He's chairman of Cybex. We are a manufacturer of fitness equipment that we make in the USA and sell globally. And EHE, which is the oldest and largest provider of physical exams. But the reason that John is here tonight is that he is the owner of Atlas Productions, the producer of Atlas Shrugged. Parts 1 and 2 have been released, and we're going to hear more about Part 3 this evening. In addition to being on the board of the Atlas Society and involved with a wide variety of libertarian organizations, this is a little-known fact. John is a politician. It's the truth. He is the mayor of the town of Tavistock. Now, I mean, is this good or what? Now, I should emphasize that the town of Tavistock is comprised of 3 homes and a golf course. But he is the mayor. He is the mayor. He also is a racehorse enthusiast. He is the 2004 U.S. poker champion. And if that's not enough, he has a really gorgeous wife. And the next member of the panel is Harmon Kaslow. Now, Harmon is a native Californian. I mean, like, Harmon is really seriously California. He's a native of UC Davis. He graduated from UC Davis, and he has a law degree from, it's a California school. You may have heard of it, University of Southern California. We try not to hold the law degree against him. He started out in the film business as an entertainment attorney at the international law firm of Shea and Gould, and then he moved into the business side, and he is credited as executive producer on more than 15 pictures, president and COO of Kismet Entertainment Group, where he did a series of successful, fairly low-budget films, including one that became a cult classic, called the Dog Soldiers, thank you, which is one of Britain's most successful horror pictures. So then he went to Amark Entertainment, and then, as John puts it, Harmon fell out of the sky into the world of Atlas Shrugged and John Aglioloro, and his life has never been the same since. But he is the producer of Parts 1 and 2 and working on Part 3. And our third panelist is Duncan Scott. Duncan is a writer and filmmaker. He is also a California guy with over 150 productions to his credit, including 4 Emmy Awards. And this is the 4th time that Duncan has worked on an Ayn Rand-related project. He worked directly with Ayn Rand on the restoration of the 1942 film classic We the Living, based on Rand's first novel, and his company now distributes the film. He wrote a stage adaptation of Rand's first novel, Anthem, and he is currently producing Inside the Mind of Ayn Rand, which is a documentary that is exploring some of Rand's more controversial ideas. Duncan was a screenwriter on Atlas Part 2 and is working on the script for Part 3. He is also the director of the nonprofit Objectivist History Project, which he founded in 2004. And before I ramble on anymore, please get up here. We got questions to ask. I see a lot of Atlas Shrugged ties. I see Atlas Shrugged lapel pins. Thank you very much. So, in no particular order, but I'll start out with you, John. So, you basically came to Hollywood as an outsider. And I'm sure you had an impression of what Hollywood was like before you got there. And you probably have an impression now. What's different about what you thought and what you think?
Well, there is a, can you hear me all right? Yeah, there really is a glitter in Hollywood. I mean, when you're at Beverly Hills and a restaurant and there's movies and you're looking to your right and there's Steve Martin, and you're looking to your left, and there's one of the new starlets. There is a vitality about it, and it can't be denied. But there is a superficiality that exists. There's not a sense of reality. There is a limitless aspiration that's never met. It's a sad place. It's a desperate place. It really is a potpourri of emotions. But then you get down to the business of what you need to do. And making a movie is, if you've got the money and you've got the script and you can go to an agent, you can hire the actors and the director and the rest of it, you know, you're accepted, you're part of it. There's a lingo there that Harmon knows very well. But you learn to take seriously what you need to do. You get it done. It's not a place I'd want to live. If I can have a home for free in Beverly Hills, I wouldn't take it. Youngstown, Ohio beats it by a mile. But you know, look, we're
no
there.
offense to all of you in Ohio.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, but we're there to do a job, and there's a huge supply of talent, and but the demand is greater. So you can get a lot of, I mean, they say below the line, under, you know, above the line. Above the line are the actors and the directors, and below the line are the, you know, production assistants, the costume designers, the directors of photography. All this supply, everyone wants to go to Hollywood. Everyone wants to be an actor. It's a bad decision, but people do it, and some succeed. That's why it continues. When you, I've had the frequent questions, so I'll answer before it's you know, why don't you have the same cast in 2 that you had in 1? Why don't you have the same cast in 3 as you had in 2? If we did, we would be held up with a gun, because the people who would do 1 and then got to do 2 would command a much bigger price for 2 than 1. For 3, there would be no part 3. I mean, the price would be out of range. So unless you're willing to do a Lord of the Rings and do a trilogy where you've got, you know, 1 and 2 and 3, and they shoot everything and then they release it 3 separate times, there's no shot of even contemplating having the same. First of all, they're in different gigs. They're in another country. They're doing another project. And to get 30 actors the same, it's impossible. But bottom line,
Thanks.
it's a nice place.
Okay.
Now that you didn't see that.
Okay. You know, David, we were going to have some cards on the table. Did we do that? If we did not, it's okay, good. You have cards on your table. If there's questions that you have to pose, please write them down, and before we finish, we'll collect them and let to whomever they are addressed. So anyway, Harmon, John told us something about Hollywood, and yet I hear that you're not planning to do part 3 in Hollywood.
Right.
Why is that?
Well,
And where are you going to do it?
well, what's interesting is when John and I were first talking about Atlas Shrugged back in April of 2010, I had suggested originally to John that we not do the movie in Los Angeles because we could save a lot of money, and then we could also take advantage of a lot of the things available in other states that are designed to attract motion pictures. And John said, no, I want to make a Hollywood film. I want to use the best people that we can put together, and I want to do it here in Los Angeles. And so we embarked on parts 1 and 2 there. And after really pouring a lot of resources into both of those movies, we just came to realization that it was probably a 20% higher cost for us to just stay in Los Angeles. In addition to that, there's a non-monetary cost associated with it, which is, you know, the unions. And I think we signed somewhere between 8 to 10 union contracts to be able to film, to employ people in LA. We had to sign 10 contracts. And then each of those unions afterwards wanted to audit us and make certain we didn't mistreat their members. And it was so much of a burden that when we decided to proceed with part 3, we go, let's just sort of look at what we want to accomplish, and where can we go where we would be welcome, and where can we go to make the movie under sort of better circumstances and conditions. So we have, I think I brought up 3 states, and John said, I put Pennsylvania on there. So John said, you don't have to look really too hard at the other states. Look really hard at Pennsylvania. And what we found was the state very welcoming to us. They have great crews there. They did Silver Linings Playbook. So we believe there's a lot of talented people there. Met with the casting director. She'd read Atlas Shrugged. She's very excited about us coming there. So I think there's a lot of karma associated with it, but I also think we'll avoid a lot of headache.
So, Ed Crane, this will make it easy for you to get up from Washington, you know, with your big role as you're planning.
Well, that's what he didn't tell you about Hollywood. Is full of a lot of promises.
So, Duncan, you are working on part 3, and I know that you have previously worked on other Rand projects. First of all, tell us a little bit about what it was like to work with Ayn Rand.
I get asked that a lot, and needless to say, it was an amazing experience. For those of you that don't know, she brought me in, and the producers, Hank and Erica Holzer, brought me in to do originally just some of the editing and restoration work on this beautiful old film that had been made during World War II. But at a very young age, I found myself sitting alongside Ayn Rand and hearing her make decisions about that film, and it was just extraordinary. I thought it was going to be an extremely difficult project, and yet her mind was so sharp, and she was so focused on what needed to be done, and not distracted by anything else buzzing around in the air. It was just an amazing thing to see, and something that I've always remembered all my life.
So how has your experience with her influenced your screenwriting for part 3?
Actually, that's an interesting story. We've talked about that recently. it's actually been extremely helpful because I often get asked, how do you decide what to cut out and leave in Atlas Shrugged? It's such a massive book. There's so many characters, so many scenes. And I take my cue from what Ayn Rand decided to do with We the Living. And I think the parallels are terrifically close. In that movie, it was very long, and the film had to be cut down quite a bit. And I envisioned this horrible process of condensing these scenes until, you know, they probably wouldn't have made sense. They would have been run so short. But she said, and had no hesitation about this, we're going to stick to the main storyline of the main three characters in that book, Kira, Andre, and Leo, and their story. And the subplots will, if we can't fit them in, they're going to have to fall by the wayside. And I was really impressed with this because this was a semi-autobiographical book, and I know that some of these subplots involve people that she knew in real life. Names were changed, but they were people that she knew. They were family members even. And here she, with one stroke, said, we're going to preserve the main storyline, and these subplots, there's not room for them, and they're going to just fall by the wayside. And so actually the restoration work and the cutting down of We the Living was relatively easy once that decision was made. So as we approached Atlas Shrugged Part 3 and Part 2, I kept that in mind. I think Ayn Rand, I think I can safely say, she would want those main storylines that of these main characters preserved and presented in their to full effect. And if some of the subplots had to be left out, then it was more important to keep those characters with those themes intact.
Thanks. John, you have been at this for some time. You brought the rights 20 years ago. You've had an awful lot of interest from Hollywood. There's been the whole Angelina Jolie saga. There has been the Al Ruddys, who was the producer of The Godfather. There's been the writer for Braveheart. But at the end of the day, you had to do it yourself. I mean, sort of like, you know, Dagny with the John Galt line. Why do you think the studios were not interested?
You know, Ayn Rand said herself that the artistic intellectual community just falls toward the collectivist side. There's only a minority available of talented, artistic, intellectual folks that move toward an individualistic, you know, our sort of people. I don't know why. That is a hell of a question, because there's is it a brain lobe thing? But that's the way it is, and so I think there's an adversity. Certainly, the MSNBC crowd was reluctant to carry anything after the movies were made. I got no call from Chris Matthews, and you know. I mean, you know, Roger Ebert actually called, I think you, Harmon, and wanted to get a DVD ahead of time, and we knew that what would happen. So actually, in part one, we sent a DVD to all of the critics. They did what we thought they would do. There was a great divide between those that loved the movie and gave good reviews of it, and the critics who denigrated it mercilessly. I mean, almost childlessly, in a childish way, never approaching the ideas, never approaching what she said, never approaching what was presented in the movie itself. It's wearying to realize that, you know, you're not getting a fair shake. And of course, a lot of people, look, I do it myself. You do it. You hey, honey, let's go to the movies tonight. You take a look, and they really beat this. The critics beat this up. Why don't we see this other thing? And it matters. And critics did beat it up. I think the movies were decently made. There is a savior in Michael Burns, who's the co-chairman of Lionsgate. He did try. I mean, he sent money over our way to our Atlas Productions 3 or 4 times in about a 7-8 year period. And I think, David, you gave at the eulogy, you gave the Kipling's If, you read at Ayn Rand's funeral. Michael Burns was just a 21, 22-year-older, was that in March of '82. He was at the funeral. He's tried to bring this forward. We had a dinner with Angelina Jolie, and Brad Pitt wasn't there, but Geyer Kaczynski, her manager, and Michael Burns was there. His wife was there, nursing their first child at the dinner there.
Oh, come on.
No. Angelina was nursing. I'd be, it was. But all of that, and they tried, but so there's we got an uphill battle with it. We're going to get it done. Part 3 will be done. There is real discussion. I think we've got a tailwind with the miniseries. We're looking at a 26-part miniseries after Part 3 between Amazon and Netflix. These people, HBO, they need product because they're getting out competed. So something like this has some attraction, but.
So it's tough to do a message movie, and Harmon.
I just want to
Yeah.
add one thing. First off, Michael Burns is the co-chairman of Lionsgate. Lionsgate does like Hunger Games and some major film. It's a second-tier studio, but when you only have 3 other studios, it's a player. And I remember in May, so John comes out in April of 2010 saying, okay, I'm going to make the movie. We start some publicity, and you get an email from Michael Burns saying, hey, why don't you come by, give me a call, let's talk about producing Atlas Shrugged. And so this is just a series of kind of false starts and people just not appreciating the pressures that John was under. And finally, John just had to come and say, these guys in Hollywood just don't have the courage to say yes to this movie. And I think ultimately, John made that decision.
So what are the particular challenges in making and distributing a movie that has a message that might be not part of the Hollywood mainstream?
Well, when we started this, what I told John was if a Hollywood studio isn't going to produce the movie, they're not going to distribute the movie. Number one, the way Hollywood works is they're not waiting for independent producers to show up with a movie to decide what they're going to put in a theater. They have massive studios. They're spending millions of dollars. They're making their own movies. So when they didn't have the courage to take on the message, I told John, if you want to get it in theaters, we've got to go do that ourselves. And we'll go about it in a very, kind of community level, grassroots type basis and really try to reach out. We know millions of people have read the book. Our challenge is, to try to make them aware. And, that process in and of itself is very daunting, as we all know. But over time, we've been able to establish a pretty substantial community of people across the country who will support us, and that's enabled us to become our own distributors of movies. And hopefully once we get through with Part 3, Atlas Distribution Company will be a vehicle for other message-type films to take our experience and our relationships and hopefully get that message in front of an audience that Hollywood, of course, would never see as commercial or viable.
Thanks. Duncan, Atlas Shrugged was set in the near future, but in reality it was written 50 years ago. So what are some of the issues that you've dealt with in trying to put it in the day after tomorrow?
Well, it's clearly dialogue needed to be somewhat updated and still capture the essence and the style that Ayn Rand had in the book. And that's no small thing, because Ayn Rand had a very particular writing style, and it would be very easy to just write contemporary dialogue and lose all of that. And so I've been working very hard, and it's still an ongoing process, to make the language sound contemporary, but still in the style that Ayn Rand wrote. I mean, a lot of the book was written even as early as the late 40s and into the early 50s, and dialogue was different then. So it's not a matter of not completely loving what she wrote. We do, but you're looking at a movie which clearly the background and the characters and everything is set in the near future, and there's some dialogue and changes that I think fit very well. Another challenge is, back when she wrote the book, railroads were sexy. And frankly, they're still hugely important, but fewer people realize that. And I've made some effort to make it clear to the viewer that the country depends, even in the near future, on their food and their vital supplies and everything to have the rail deliver that. And especially in the world of Atlas Shrugged, where the option for truck transport and planes has faded away because of all the problems and shortages and gas prices. So Taggart Transcontinental and Dagny and unfortunately Jim are our ticket to getting things delivered and brought home, and there's the real danger of starvation and shortages if they can't deliver the goods. So we're trying to ramp up people's focus on that issue and not have people be dismissive of railroads. It's not satellites flying around. It's a very essential part of the economy even today, and that's one of the challenges in contemporizing the script.
Let me just add that Atlas Shrugged will be made in 100 years from now by someone. It'll be in the public domain. It'll definitely be done. It won't be about railroads. It won't be about cell phones and things we're trying to fit in now. It's not about technology or the vernacular or what people are doing in that time 100 years from now. It's about the message. It's about the philosophy. And so whatever is done and whatever is in 1940s and 50s, when she wrote Atlas Shrugged in 57, as Duncan said, railroads were in. But 100 years from now or whatever, who the hell knows? But the message will be consistent. Let me also add that we want to. We're going to take our time. We're going to do it right, and we know we were rushed in one, and it was April of 2010, June of 2010. 2 months later, June 13th, was first day of photography, with 150 people at $175,000 a day in the shoot. If we had waited until 48 hours later, June 15th, we'd have lost the rights. So it was a rush. Part 2, there was a rush. So Part 3, we're really, we've got Duncan on board. We're going to take our time and make sure it's right. So even the folks at Ayn Rand Institute will hopefully enjoy the movie also.
So, Harmon, on that note, what are you going to do differently with Part 3 to promote it that will improve its success?
Well, I mean, I think for us, and really for any motion picture, there's a couple of common threads with independent films that have succeeded. The first is that, and this is our friends at Google told us this, which is really getting the trailers played into theaters. So to give ourselves a much wider lead time between when we have a completed film and when it'll show up in theaters. And hopefully, we can take advantage of that free publicity. The other thing that we're planning on doing is, we'll have a completed film, should sometime in spring of 2014, and then be able to take that film out to audiences like the Atlas Society and others to screen it and begin the word-of-mouth process. Because that has been really the characteristic of success of message movies. Like Passion of the Christ is the most successful independent movie ever produced and distributed did $600-700 million, and they were doing screenings for 6-7 months prior to when it showed up in a theater, because it really is about the people in this room liking the movie and then going and grabbing their neighbor and saying, I know you won't read the book, but at least give me an hour and a half of your life, and I think you'll understand why I've been trying to get you to read the book. So, you know, our aspiration is not only for Duncan to sort of capture the essence of what Atlas Shrugged is, but also in the process try to help connect the dots so that it'll be informative to people who maybe not have read the book, and at the same time be a tremendous celebratory experience for those who have.
Thanks. David, would you mind seeing if there's any cards that anybody has of questions? Okay, well, while David is doing the collection, passing the collection plate, Duncan, I would ask you, as you're adapting the book for part 3, I'm sure you see things that you're saying, oh my God, this is so much like what's happening today. What do you see there?
Well, that's endless. I'm sorry to say. I wish I could say I can't correlate this to anything going on today, but unfortunately, everywhere I look, there are ways to correlate it. I think it saddens me a bit that Ayn Rand wrote this book and probably hoped that by writing it, she was preventing the reality that we're looking at today. But here it is. And I think this movie can have some effect on a return to freedom. Obviously, it needs to be seen, it needs to be distributed widely, but to get back to your question, the correlations are all over the place. One of my concerns in working on the script is how directly should I make references to things going on today? And there's a certain reluctance because I think this is a timeless message, and I don't want this to be a film that's stuck in the Obama administration or something like that. I think these were issues that were that Ayn Rand was concerned about in the late 40s and early 50s and even before that. There are issues now, certainly, and there'll be unfortunately, there'll probably be a battle that we have to keep fighting 10 and 15 and 20 years into the future. And I hope the message of the movie is something that stays relevant. So I've avoided trying to make too many very direct references where people say, oh, they're talking about, what Obama's doing. I think a lot of people will easily connect the dots because it was just incredible in how many places the book foresaw events and programs and policies and mindset that we're seeing today. So it's a delicate juggling and balancing act.
John, you want to weigh in on that same question? What is the relevance for today that you see? I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. How about you, Harmon? He has to go home tonight. You.
No. What I was just going to follow up on what Duncan was saying in the sense that in part 2, a lot of people looked at the world that we were creating for when that picture was taking place and said, oh, we're just copying the Occupy movement and that sort of thing. And so what we learned really from that experience is that what we don't want to do is create anything distracting from the underlying message so that people will look at it and think we're trying to make a political commentary. Our goal is not to do that. Our goal is really to try to capture what has inspired and influenced so many people with the message of the book and not some political commentary on what might be showing up in today's news.
Okay. While David is finishing with those, one last question, Harmon. I know you've done a lot of polling of the Atlas community. Do you want to share a couple of highlights of who the people are who are interested in this message?
Yeah, we have created an online community to try to interact with the people who support us, and it's a couple 100,000 people. So we sent out a poll because, you know, we're making assumptions on who are these people who are reading our emails and buying the lapel pins and supporting us on Facebook and all of these things in the internet world. And what we found out is that most of them, when we asked them what their political affiliation, most of them said they're Republicans. And we asked them, you know, what their the sex. Most of them were men. Most of our age group is over the age of 50, and most of them are Christian. And so, you know, what it's told us is, you know, there's a huge population willing to support the film who really seem to embrace the free market aspects of Atlas Shrugged, and we see that when we post things on our Facebook page. And so, while we have a good variety of other people, it just opened our eyes to make certain we were sensitive to that group of people that were out there trying to help us spread this message.
Yeah, before we get to questions, you know, a bit of good news, I think, is that, you know, after Ayn Rand released Atlas Shrugged in '57, it was just savagely attacked from Whittaker Chambers and, you know, William Buckley and that crowd and all the rest of them. And it took a long time. I mean, the book sales were low. We all know today it's a couple 100,000 copies a year. I think in '08, '09, some of them went to several thousand, 100,000 copies of Atlas Shrugged a year. And what we're finding just recently, I'm talking like 6 weeks ago, is that the video on demand sales are really picking up big time from very low, you know, a year ago. Yeah. So you know, let's hope, and it's looking good. Let's hope that what happened to her with very low book sales for quite a period of time, and then up to that point where, you know, I think it's like 1,000 books 90% of the books published sell not too much more than 1,000 books a year. A bestseller is 100,000 copies. She sells 200,000 copies a year for half a century. So let's hope the video on demand is picking up. It's good stuff.
And I'd just like to add, John, that if I have my history of Ayn Rand right, every book that she wrote, everything that she released was brutalized and criticized and sold poorly in the beginning. And every one of them now are classics and sell constantly, so that bodes well for the film series.
Okay. The first question is for Duncan, and actually it's a couple of parts here. First is part 3 opens after a big cliffhanger. And how will you treat the context that surrounds Galt's Gulch to clarify its meaning at the start of part 3?
That's a great question, and one we discuss at length all the time. Clearly, when you're starting a movie that's in the third part of a book where there have been 700-800 pages preceding it, you have the challenge of how do you engage the audience, how do you get them up to speed with the story, and do it in some way that doesn't seem artificial and pushed on them. It might be premature to go into specifics of what we're doing with part 3, but we're trying very hard to engage the audience immediately. We've examined scenes and incidents that took place in part 1 and part 2 to mine those areas for ways to reconnect our audience very quickly with these characters, and so that you care about what they're involved in, you understand the challenges they're facing, you understand who the antagonists are. It's a great question because it's probably one of the hardest parts of figuring out how to do part 3. a movie has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Part 3 wasn't written that way as a book. You were just supposed to turn the page from Part 2 and keep going. I think we're coming up with some really great solutions. They're evolving, so I don't want to say things and then you'll find out later that they were different, but we're very focused on solving those very issues.
Okay. The next question is, Harmon, young people prefer The Fast and the Furious to The Notebook. So how do you promote Atlas to the youth, given these standards? It's a good
Wow,
question.
that's a good question. Because our audience skews very old. I think the good news is that by having all 3 parts of the movie completed puts us in a very different category than Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. So if somebody has an interest in Atlas Shrugged, they know that they can go from beginning to end. What we're looking at doing, and Alexander's here, is really trying to interface directly with youth and try to get them excited. For movies, it's all about excitement. There's so much competition for our attention on a Friday and Saturday when we're going to be in a theater that if we don't make people aware and excited to see the movie, they're going to go do something else. And so the challenge is really figuring out how do we tap into what will generate excitement among those students. And maybe the fact that they can watch our movie instead of read a 1,200-page book, that may be a winner for us.
That'll be a good thing.
The fact that they can watch Part 1 and 2 on video on demand the preceding week and see the movie in the theater, that may bode very well for us. So, but we'll figure something out, or Alexander will give us some clues as to what his audience would like to see from us.
Whose question was that, if I may ask?
All right, okay. So, John, if at the end of the day, Atlas Shrugged turns out to be a money-losing project for you, will it, God forbid, will it have been worth it, and if so, why?
Well, it's a money-losing project so far. The box office for Part 1 was $4.4 million, very low. Started out well. Part 2, we doubled the budget from $10 million to $20. The box office was 3.3. So we're deep in there, but that's just money. We're going to get Part 3 done. I think it'll be the best of the 3. Interesting commentary that Harmon made and the question that was made. Part 1, Dagny was too young. She just did Mercy. She was 27. Followed up by a very good star. She did The Lucky One. But we had comment over and over, she was sort of young. And then Part 2, well, she was sort of old. And we did some work on her a little bit in post. But with that commentary and getting the young, I think we're going to have to get Dagny somewhere in the maybe early 30s, and Reardon in the middle 40s. That'll be the range, and you really do sculpt your casting that way. And so having the results of 1 and 2 do help you. I think if we did Reardon, late 40s, early 50s, and Dagny, early 40s, middle 40s, it would not be as good. We would not attract the youth. So there's a lot of that sort of thing that we will be doing without sacrificing the message or the philosophy or anything like that. But you need to, you need to use common sense and sell the product when you have that opportunity.
Hold on. I think he might be able to make money with digital plastic surgery. That's what we were doing.
I won't tell anybody that you said that. I won't mention that. Well, listen, thank you all for your kind attention. To the person who had a question for the moderator about Alan Greenspan, I'll stay around afterward. And I think these three gentlemen will be around to answer your questions, but we'll close this up for now. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Aaron, the floor is yours.